History of the Jews by John Murray in 1830. Book 2. Israel in Egypt. Family of Jacob, Joseph, State of Egypt, Famine, Migration of Jacob and his whole family, Administration of Joseph, Period between Joseph and Moses, Birth and education of Moses, Flight and return to Egypt, Plagues of Egypt, Exodus or departure of the Israelites, Passage of the Red Sea, Ancient traditions. The seed of Abraham had now become a family. From the 12 sons of Israel, it was to branch out into a nation. Of these sons, the 4 elder had been born from the prolific Leah, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. The barren Rachel had substituted her handmaid Bilhah, who gave birth to Dan and Naphtali. Leah, after her sister's example, substituted Zilpah. From her sprang Gad and Asher. Rachel, for the sake of some mandrakes, supposed among Eastern women to act as a love philtre and remove barrenness, yielding up her right to her sister, Leah again bore Issachar and Zebulun, and a daughter, Dinah. At length, the comely Rachel was blessed with Joseph, and in Canaan, Benoni, or Benjamin, completed the 12. The children of the handmaidens had no title to the primogeniture. Reuben had forfeited the esteem of his father by incest with his concubine. Simeon and Levi by their cruelty towards the Sychemites. Judah, the next brother, was inadvertently betrayed into a serious crime. There was a singular usage afterwards admitted into the Mosaic law, that in case a married man died without issue, his next brother was bound to take his wife, in order that his line might not become extinct. The perpetuation of their name and race through their offspring being then, as it is still in some countries of the East, the one great object to which all moral laws, even those generally recognized, were to give way. The eldest son of Judah, Er, died. The second, Onan, was guilty of a criminal dereliction of that indispensable duty, and was cut off for his offense. Judah, neglecting his promise to bestow the widow Tamar on his third son, Shelah, was betrayed into an unlawful connection with her, and became the incestuous father of 2 children. But Joseph, the elder born of the beloved Rachel, had always held the first place in the affections of his father. He was a beautiful youth, and it was the pride of the fond father to behold him in a dress distinguished from the rest of his sons, a coat of many colors. The envy of his brethren was still farther excited by 2 dreams seen by Joseph, which, in the frankness of his disposition, he took no pains to conceal. In one, the brothers were binding sheaves of corn, a proof that they were advancing in the cultivation of the soil. The sheaves of the brothers bent and did homage to that of Joseph. In the other, the sun and the moon and 11 stars seemed to make obeisance to Joseph. Each of these successive visions intimated his future superiority over all the family of Israel. One day, when Joseph had set forth to the place where his brothers were accustomed to feed their flocks, they returned to their father's tent without him, bearing that very dress on which Jacob had so often gazed with pleasure, steeped in blood. The agony of the old man cannot be described with such pathetic simplicity as in the language of the sacred volume. He refused to be comforted, and he said, "I will go down into the grave with my son mourning." But before he went down to the grave, he was to behold his son under far different circumstances. His brothers at first, notwithstanding the remonstrances of Reuben, the eldest born, a man of more mild and generous disposition, had determined on putting their hated rival to death. With this intention, they had let him down into a pit, probably an old disused well. A caravan of Arabian traders happening to pass by, they acceded to the more merciful and advantageous proposition of Judah to sell him as a slave. Though these merchants were laden only with spicery, balm, and myrrh, commodities in great request in Egypt, all of them being used in embalming the dead, they were sure of a market for such a slave as Joseph, and in that degraded and miserable character he arrived in Egypt. But the divine providence watched, even in the land of the stranger, over the heir to the promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The slave rose with a rapidity surprising, though by no means unparalleled in Eastern kingdoms, to be the all-powerful vizier of the king of Egypt. He was first bought by Potiphar, a chief officer of the king, the captain of the guard, by whom he was speedily promoted to the care of the whole household. The entire confidence of his master in the prudence and integrity of the servant is described in these singular terms. He left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. The virtue of Joseph in other respects was equal to his integrity, but not so well rewarded. Falsely accused by the arts of his master's wife, whose criminal advances he had repelled, he was thrown into prison. The dungeon opens a way to still farther advancement. Wherever he is, he secures esteem and confidence. Like his former master, the keeper of the prison entrusts the whole of his responsible duties to the charge of Joseph. But the chief cause of his rapid rise to fortune and dignity is his skill in the interpretation of dreams. Among his fellow prisoners were the chief cupbearer and chief purveyor of the king. Each of these men was perplexed by an extraordinary vision. The interpretation of Joseph was justified by the fate of both. One, as he predicted, was restored to his honors. The other suffered an ignominious death. Through the report of the former, the fame of Joseph, in a character so important among a superstitious people, reached the palace, and when the king himself was in the same manner disturbed with visions which baffled the professed diviners of the country, Joseph was summoned from the prison. The dreams of the king, according to the exposition of Joseph, under the symbolic forms of 7 fat and fleshly kine, followed by 7 lean and withered ones, 7 good ears of corn by 7 parched and blasted with the east wind, prefigured 7 years of unexampled plenty, to be succeeded by 7 of unexampled dearth. The advice of Joseph being demanded how to provide against the impending calamity, he recommends that a 5th part of the produce during the 7 abundant years shall be laid up in granaries built for the purpose. The wisdom of this measure was apparent, and who so fit to carry such plans into effect as he whose prudence had suggested them? Joseph, therefore, is at once installed in the dignity of chief minister over the whole of this great and flourishing kingdom. The information we obtain from the Mosaic narrative concerning the state and constitution of Egypt during this period is both valuable in itself and agrees strictly with all the knowledge which we acquire from other sources. Egypt had long been the great corn country of the ancient world, now in a high state of cultivation, but dependent for its fertility on the overflow of the river on whose banks it lay. Should the annual increase of the Nile be interrupted, the whole valley would remain a barren and unvegetating waste. The cause of the long period of famine is nowhere indicated, but it was by no means a local calamity. It extended to all the adjacent countries. A long and general drought, which would burn up the herbage of all the pastoral districts of Asia, might likewise diminish that accumulation of waters which, at its regular period, pours down the channel of the Nile. The waters are collected in the greatest part from the drainage of all the high levels in that region of Central Africa, where the tropical rains about the summer solstice fall with incessant violence. But whatever might be its cause, Egypt escaped the famine which pressed so severely on other countries only through the prudent administration of Joseph. It is necessary, however, before we describe the policy which he adopted, or the settlement of the family of Israel in this country, to give some insight into the state of the Egyptian government and people. For without this, we shall neither be able to comprehend the transactions which relate to the Israelites in Egypt, nor the degree of originality to be assigned to the Mosaic institutions. Egypt, before this period, had enjoyed many centuries of civilization, most likely of opulence and splendor. Whether she had already reared her vast and mysterious pyramids, commenced the colossal temples of Ipsambol and Thebes, or excavated those wonderful subterraneous sepulchral palaces for her dead kings, cannot at present be decided with certainty. But of her singular constitution we have distinct indications in the Mosaic narrative. The people were divided into castes, like those of India, as they exist to the present day, and as they formerly prevailed among many other Oriental nations. At the head of these castes stood that of the priesthood. From this order, the king was usually selected. If one of the warriors, the next class in rank, should attain to that eminence, he was always installed and enrolled in the superior order. The priestly caste, in rank and power, stood far above the rest of the people. In each nome or district, if indeed these divisions were of so early a date, stood a temple and a sacerdotal college. In them 1/3 of the whole land of the country was inalienably vested. The priests were not merely the ministers of religion. They were the hereditary conservators of knowledge. They were the public astronomers by whom all the agricultural labors of the people were regulated, the public geometricians, whose service was indispensable, since the Nile annually obliterated the landmarks of the country. In their hieroglyphical characters, the public events were recorded. They were the physicians. In short, to them belonged the whole patrimony of science, which was inseparably bound up with their religion. The political powers of this hereditary aristocracy were unbounded. They engrossed, apparently, both the legislative and judicial functions. They were the framers, the conservators, the expounders of the laws. As interpreter of dreams, Joseph, no doubt, intruded into the province of this all-powerful caste, and the king, not improbably with a view to disarm their jealousy, married his new vizier to the daughter of the priest of the sun, who dwelled in On, called afterwards by the Greeks Heliopolis, the city of the sun. Moreover, in the great political measure of Joseph, the resumption of all the lands into the hands of the crown, the sacred property of the priests, was exempted from the operation of the law, and the whole class supported, during the famine, at the royal charge. The next caste in dignity was that of the warriors, called by Herodotus Hermotibites or Calasseres. The lower classes of the people constituted the rest of the orders. According to Herodotus, 5, to Diodorus, 3 more. The latter reckons husbandmen, artisans, and shepherds. Herodotus, shepherds, swineherds, manufacturers, and shopkeepers, interpreters, and mariners, that is, the boatmen of the Nile. The boundaries of these castes were unalterably fixed. The son held forever the same rank, and pursued the same occupation with his father. The profession of a shepherd, probably the lowest of these castes, was held in particular discredit. Every shepherd was an abomination to the Egyptians. Several reasons have been assigned for this remarkable fact. A German writer of great ability supposes that when the first civilizers of Egypt, whom, from reasons which every accession to our knowledge of ancient Egypt seems to confirm, he derives from Ethiopia, directed the attention of the people to tillage, for which the country was so admirably adapted, in order to wean the rude people from their nomadic habits. They studiously degraded the shepherds into a sort of pariah caste. Another and a more general opinion derives this hostility to the name of shepherd from a recent and most important event in the Egyptian history. While Egypt was rapidly advancing in splendor and prosperity, a fierce and barbarous Asiatic horde burst suddenly upon her fruitful provinces, destroyed her temples, massacred her priests, and having subdued the whole of Lower Egypt, established a dynasty of 6 successive kings. These Hyksos, or royal shepherds, with their savage clans, afterwards expelled by the victorious Egyptians, Monsieur Champollion thinks with apparent reason that he recognizes on many of the ancient monuments a people with red hair, blue eyes, and covered only with an undressed hide loosely wrapped over them, are painted, sometimes struggling in deadly warfare with the natives, more usually in attitudes of the lowest degradation, which the scorn and hatred of their conquerors could invent. They lie prostrate under the footstools of the kings, in the attitude described in the book of Joshua, where the rulers actually set their feet on the necks of the captive monarchs. The common people appear to have taken pride in having the figures of these detested enemies wrought on the soles of their sandals, that they might be thus perpetually trampled on. Even the dead carried this memorial of their hatred into the grave. The same figures are painted on the lower wrappers of the mummies, accompanied with similar marks of abhorrence and contempt. It would be difficult to find a more apt illustration of the phrase in the book of Genesis, "Every shepherd was an abomination unto the Egyptians." Several other incidents in the Mosaic history seem to confirm the opinion that these invaders had been expelled, and that but recently, before the period of Joseph's administration.